Welcome, everybody, to Webinar Wednesday. I'm Dr. Pebbles Turbyville, and I'm the CEO of Horses and Humans Research Foundation. And just a small little sidebar here, we're being sponsored by Trafalgar Books. And if you go to our website and go under the Giving tab, you can see Trafalgar tab. And we're actually in their affiliated program. So if you buy any of the books, we get a small proceeds. So just wanted to give out a shout out to Trafalgar, as well as if you want to buy some books, go to our website. So anyway, welcome. And tonight we have a special guest we're real excited about hearing about, but I'm going to turn it over to Marcy, and she's going to introduce our guest.
So welcome, everyone. HHRF is so excited to have Mary Ann Simonds as our guest speaker this evening. Her background is so extensive and she has such amazing experience. It was really challenging to try to boil it down to a brief introduction. So I'm going to try. So Mary Ann is a lifelong rider and lover of horses. She studied wild horse ecology, sport horse behavior, and equestrian psychology. She developed a professional practice of more than 45 years as a researcher, educator. Did I get that wrong? No, okay. Educator, coach, and consultant. She's a pioneer in the field of human-animal interactions and established models for minimizing stress in both humans and horses with a focus to improve sport horse welfare. She lectures internationally, working with veterinarians, professionals, and equine enthusiasts, and has published numerous articles, books, and videos. Mary Ann has been the director of the Whole Horse and Equestrian Science Institute for 35 years and now lives in Wellington, Florida, where she continues to teach, write, and speak on the subject of equine welfare. Her book, and of course I have my own copy here, A Horse by Nature, provides hundreds of tips to help people better understand the natural social behaviors of horses living both with and without humans. The book weaves science and intuition together, giving the reader assessment tools for determining equine personality and learning style, as well as guidance for enhanced interspecies communication. The reader will gain an insider's view of wild horse culture based on the author's years of research and learn how to apply the essential knowledge horses teach horses to better your relationship with any horse. So because Mary Ann is so knowledgeable and she can talk about so many horse-related topics, and because we only have 1 hour, we're going to begin with the PowerPoint presentation, and there will be opportunities for interactive questions along the way. So we're asking you to please type your questions, your comments, and answers to some of her questions in the chat. And our lovely Anna will read as many of them as time allows. So, Mary Ann.
Thank you. Okay, are we screen sharing now?
Yes.
We are.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Maybe we were screen sharing before. I'm not sure. Okay, let me go back a second. And for all those that are here, I'm only going to deal with the last part of the book, which is what we do with horses, ethics, economics, and welfare, and just give you a little background so you can look at this picture of the connection. I grew up in California showing jumpers, loved horses like lots of girls, but I realized that there's a culture around equestrian that was different than what I thought horses were saying. And so my first experience at a horse show of having sort of a disconnect was watching someone hit a horse over the head finally with a crop that was throwing its head, and walking over to the person and saying, "Why are you hitting a horse with a headache?" and seeing the trainer's look in his eye that he was just astonished, like it never occurred to him that a horse had a headache. And I realized I really needed to go study, how do I know what I know? How do people that have this connection know what they know? And try to make it into a very simple, tip book that's useful to people. So with that, the book is set up in 3 sections, with wild horses in the first section of, what I spent my time doing, identifying the social ecology and functional behavior of wild horses. And then how do we apply that in our horse-human world, and then specifically even moving into our section 3, which is what I'm focused on tonight, what we do with horses, the ethics, economics, and welfare of our sport horses. And so I have used some of my favorite pictures in here, and I'll kind of go through quickly. I have a few questions for people if they care to answer them, and then I'll answer questions as we go and toward the end. So to show you what this picture is, we've got two stallions and a colt. Very few people get it right, so most people think it's a mare and a foal. But those are two stallions teaching, the father and an uncle teaching the colt how to go on patrol. And that is something that's done among functional horse society that I saw frequently and had not had a picture of it until I met Barbara Wheeler, who is the wildlife photographer with her husband Marty that did all the wildlife, wild horse photos in my book, which are just gorgeous. And then the picture to the right is Radar Flexstar, who was a special horse that I bought with a trainer friend to teach him how to be a horse. Fabulous jumper, typical of a lot of ones that come in, that has all the talent in the world, bred to the hilt, could jump 1.70 m, but he tended to buck people off and not perform well. And part of that was the horse was quite timid as a horse. He didn't know who he was. And because horses learn so much behavior from other horses, he needed to go back to horse school and learn he's the horse. And now he lives with an amateur who adores him and does the high amateur jumpers. So, oops, we are not moving. Okay, let's try this again. So, horses and humans have had relationships for over 6,000 years. Our relationships have evolved from a necessity of having to have a horse and a work animal to really our partners in sport and pleasure. And because of the social attractions between horses and people, the horse-human bonds, as we call it, have been a foundation for almost all positive relationships that you talk about. And it gives mutual benefit to both. And while I was in Wyoming, I studied a lot of relationships of, what I'd call real cowboys out on the range that were with their horses all day, all night, and their dog. And the horse preferred actually to stay with them than other horses because the human had become their best friend. So we tend to look at horsemanship separately than we do as wildlife or species. And because I'm a wildlife biologist, I tend to look at and have studied species. And so humans are a species, horses are a species. And I found more similarities than differences. While our brains work differently and our physiology is different, our needs overlap quite a bit, which is probably what's created such a wonderful horse-human bond. So horses and humans are both social species. And while horses have served humans on many levels, shaping our various cultures, horses and humans share many needs, particularly concerning to the need to feel safe. And that I bring out in the book a lot. It's kind of the foundation of humans and horses, that if we don't feel safe and we don't belong to a social group and we aren't good at forming social bonds, then we're stressed. I love to quote Darwin because people forget he did one of his early books on the study of emotions and expressions in man and other animals. One of his quotes is, "There is no fundamental difference between man and animals in their ability to feel pleasure and pain, happiness and misery." And that was back in 1872. Now, the picture here on to the left are two unrelated stallions that became friends and liked to touch and graze together. So that social bond is not limited to mares and foals or stallions and mares. It is based on friendship, and gender doesn't have a lot to do with it. So while we've looked a lot at the physical welfare of horses, we need to address both the mental and physical welfare. And most welfare guidelines, like I said, have looked at the physical, but not the mental stress. My first two books, published in German, not English, were on stress management of the performance horse. And I worked with various people in Germany, including Heike Kemmer, who was twice, I think, Olympic gold team dressage member, and a bronze in there as well with Bonaparte to help deal with his stress. And because horses are emotionally intelligent creatures, their survival depends upon their ability to form social bonds. And they serve us so well by trying to mask and hide it. And like I said, Darwin wrote the book, The Expression of Emotions in Man and Animals in 1872, which is a great book. Now the picture here you've probably seen before. It's David Marcus in Capitol at the London Olympics in 2012 when it started raining. And you can see the look in his eye. He absolutely no longer could control his stress. He was over the top. And having seen that horse before, he was one of those that just held it in like a time bomb, did everything he was supposed to do, and he finally exploded. And an unfortunate situation. But that is what happens with horses who want to please us. So not recognizing that horses have feelings is ignorance, and saying only humans can express emotions is arrogance, and not addressing the emotional welfare of horses is negligence. That's my opinion. That's a quote from the book, which we dive into. And this is one of my favorite photos. It's unfortunately not that large in the book, but this is a stallion and a colt. And this colt was injured. It was deformed. And the mares that he was with, and even the colt's mother, were very, very thirsty, and they went off to water. And the stallion stayed behind, talking, nurturing, encouraging this colt until he died. That is what we call altruistic behavior. And because we don't look for it in animals, we think it doesn't exist, but it does. And having, been in the field and seen it, not just with horses, but other animals, we are now growing into a society to start to realize more the consciousness and sentience of other beings. So my focus was understanding the social ecology of wild horses and how it can help us have better horse welfare with our domestic horses. The picture to the left is a group of young stallions talking. But if you look to the right, you notice the social groups. There'll be mares and foals, and they're wandering around, and that's pretty much a functional herd of seeing friends grazing next to friends, but then they'll go say hi to another friend, and they wander around. But there's a lot of glances. There's a lot of ear movements and eye glances and all kinds of communication going on there. So the horse's place in society varies with humans depending on culture. And so cultures, because they hold strong to their rituals, lifestyles, and beliefs, they don't change easily, which is what's created some of the welfare issues that we're going to talk about tonight. The horse sports have influenced many lifestyles, from racing to reining, and oftentimes people justify the means to the ends. They think, well, this is the way, and this we'll talk about tonight too, the social licensing, both internally and externally, that everybody trains this way, everybody does it this way, therefore it must be fine. And people are afraid to make changes because they'll look funny, they get booed, they're soft, they're not top of their game. And that's where we have to change that. We have to empower people and change that attitude. People's relationships with horses can be very personal. Therefore, people can project their own idea of welfare in the care and training of their horses. So that is one of the things that makes it difficult to basically make change, is that when you start telling someone that's had a long-term relationship with their horse, good or bad, that they're doing it wrong, they're going to be resistive. And so we have to honor the fact that people who say they care about horses and love horses, it may just be ignorance and a lack of education, not intentional negligence or causing a welfare issue. All right, so I've got a question for people. Anybody that wants to answer this. You don't have to, but it's kind of fun to see, because what I have found is getting to the core of what people believe is key. How do you view a horse? Is it a semi-wild creature who belongs living in its natural habitat, shouldn't even be domesticated? Is it a domesticated animal? Is it a companion animal? Is it an investment opportunity that you breed, buy, train, or sell? Is it a sport companion or an athlete who you can enjoy competing together with? Is it a therapist to help humans mentally or physically? Is it just a pasture ornament to decorate the farm and keep the grass down? Is it a member of your family? Is it a spiritual sentient being? Or other? And all of these could be right. I mean, you could say all of the above. You could say partial of the above. They're not mutually exclusive. but it does show you how much different thinking there is and why it's difficult to come up with welfare standards when we're all viewing the horse so differently.
So if participants would like to answer this question, you can put your comments, your questions, your answers in the chat, and Anna can read them. We can talk about some of them.
I had one person answer F.
Okay.
I think she's saying therapist to help humans. And
Yeah, I mean, there's no wrong, there's no right or wrong, and that's where it's set up to think about how you think about a horse, and they're not mutually exclusive. Most all of us that love horses, that have bred them or bought them, trained them, and sold them, they become a variety of opportunities for us. But and that relationship can change. I've had a lot of wild horses, and while I would prefer them living out on the range, sometimes that's not very beneficial to them either. So, I mean, they can be all of the above. So anyways, it's good to think about it as we move forward into the welfare.
yeah, and I had somebody ask if they could clarify a horse or my horse for those questions.
Oh, well, it was set up to as horses, I guess, to say, generally speaking, what are horses there for?
And then somebody else said all of the above.
Okay, that's good. And I have a question just administratively. I'm hoping you're seeing just the slide presentation and not my screen. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes, okay, good. So the horse right now is in transition. So humans are evolving awareness of the consciousness of other animals. We actually have quite a bit of research going on in cognitive science and how animals experience their world, cognitive ethology. The need for horses has really shifting to just the desire to have horses. Like we're creating opportunities to keep them in our lives. So horses are filling new roles with humans, you know, therapists, friends, exercise buddies, social life. And so as they fill these new roles, our relationship with them is changing. We're going from a rural pasture-kept livestock to a small space-kept pet. We're rethinking the horse's life cycle, that everyone is responsible. I think that's something that people didn't think a lot about, but now, you know, if you're a breeder, when I ask breeders, where did your horse go? I have found more breeders feeling like they want to know where they went. Like, I don't know, but I'd love to know where that colt went to. So there is an attitude of thinking about that horse's whole life. There's lots of organizations, but there's no one organization to take responsibility for overall horse welfare, which means we all have to do it at some level. And then, of course, the cost of keeping horses. So these are all issues right now that are putting the horse in transition. This creates some other issues regarding how do we establish welfare or maintain welfare. Every country's state and discipline has various organizations responsible. No one organization has authority over horse welfare in the US. There's limited cooperation among countries, states, and other organizations because we've got welfare organizations, horse organizations, they're all different. Government, the public's often more aware of what a happy horse looks like than professionals. And so we're going to focus a bit on social licensing, which will certainly influence horse sports. When a public can see a horse is not happy, they don't care. And you can tell them all kinds of things that welfare guidelines are being met. But when they see a horse that looks scared, they know a horse that looks scared. And they're going to put pressure on all horse sports to have some form of insurance of horse welfare in order for us to continue with horse sports. So the horse industry in this country too is operated without any regulations, either in the sale of horses or the care of sport horses, which has contributed to and led to unethical people operating with the horse industry, primarily for money. So the two main areas today affecting horse welfare the most are the ethics and the economics. Unethical people that are, you know, the old horse dealers. I started out in horse brokering. I didn't want to use the word dealer because I hated it. It sounded so horrible. So I called it Equine's Limited Horse Brokering and Sales, and it was really more like an adoption agency. But then money is what's driving our whole sport horse industry. The sale of horses, which we rarely talk about, and the fact that most money goes back and forth with very little oversight and disclosure. We have ethical issues, as we addressed a bit. It's based on assumptions, perceptions, and beliefs that vary based on people's relationships. People love their horses, but they show it in a different way. It's like a family. You can say you love your kid, but hard love versus soft love. There's lots of different relationships. People that see the horse as a commodity or investment in racing or even in the high-end sport horses, they don't want to lose their investment. Others, it's a profession, a farrier, a veterinarian, trainers. Some just see it as domestic livestock. If you're out in the West, a sport partner, a therapist, a friend, a sentient being, wildlife, these are all leading to ethical issues because they have different standards. So from an ethical standpoint, we have a lack of leadership, which has also encouraged unethical behavior in horse sports because of lack of oversight and no standards or guidelines or best management practices. As I said, horse dealers have had a reputation through time as being shady. There's no license or education required to be a horse professional. There's no rewards for being a good horse professional. And I heard that from many trainers and vets that good behavior does not get you anywhere in this business. And that is a sad statement that needs to change. We have unregulated money transactions. And of course, that just begs dishonest people to come into the industry. So we need leadership development within the industry. We need organizations to collaborate, educate, regulate members on business ethics, communication, and horse welfare. We need continuing education courses to be encouraged and required of members in order to maintain acceptance as professionals. We need career tracks should be developed to educate our young horse professionals in ethics and welfare, which is happening at many, not just our universities in equine science, but with equitation science and private online horse training. We're seeing a lot of good programs coming out. Our organization should give incentives, and we need ways to reward good trainers, veterinarians, and others who provide positive examples. And so we need to come together on best management practices for the welfare of the horse. So economic issues, that necessity to luxury has made a big difference. You don't need to have a horse. It's a luxury item now. And if you've noticed, we call it an equestrian lifestyle. It's not a horse lifestyle, it's the equestrian lifestyle. With the limited land, the cost of caring for a horse, showing costs, but then also the prize money are all pushing horses that used to be an expensive horse was, say, $80,000, but now at the top sport, there are $1 million horses getting sold every season. And you think, what happens to that horse if it doesn't perform and someone loses their investment? The economics are making good people even do things that they might not do to a horse to keep it in the winner's circle. So some of the factors affecting it on the economic is many of the sport horses are bred simply for the purpose of selling them. There's no, none of them, unless you're a home breeder, you breed to sell. The better the horse does for the human, the more the horse is worth and then likely to be sold. High performance horses can be sold several times during their career, never developing social connections. Well, some horses are really good. Horses are very resilient at getting and making friends. That's one of their skill sets. But I did an overview of the horses I've sold through the years and the ones I'm aware of that have been sold just in the sport horse world. And, the average is somewhere between 4 and 10 times. That horse, as you were pointing out, Pebbles also earlier, that horse goes on to another young kid and another young kid. And if that horse has a career with young kids and it gets sold over and over and it gets to stay in the same barn or have the same friends or even move to different barns where it's well cared for, it's usually very adaptable and great. It's the ones where you don't know where they went and what happened to them. So, the prize money pushes the trainers sometimes to violate horse welfare in lieu of winning. I've had numerous stories of trainers who have lost clients because they would not compete a horse and they then had all the horses pulled out of them, away from them. I've had vets tell me that they, recommended not jumping a horse or not showing a horse, and they found another vet who'd pass the horse and say it was fine. So it has really set up some bad situations at the top. You know, if injured, a sport horse loses their value, they're often put into sales packages or they're donated just to get rid of them, get them off the books. And of course, that's been the racing. How many of us got great thoroughbreds back in the day? They stopped running, you had connections with trainers, and you got an inexpensive thoroughbred that you could turn into a hunter jumper or whatever, a dressage horse. So how do we best help horses? Well, it starts with our thinking. We have to move from a human-centric thinking to horse-centric thinking, and that's that whole life of the horse. We have to think about our language and move from an equestrian lifestyle to a horse lifestyle. Horses don't care about an equestrian lifestyle. They care about a horse lifestyle. So it's that whole life cycle thinking of the horse that we have to work into our own thinking on everything we do, from breeder to buyer to moving, you know, from foal to retirement. You know,
Mary Ann, can we jump in with a question that somebody just
Oh,
posted?
absolutely.
Anna, do you want to read that? Thank you. It was about
Yeah.
your prior
It was
slide.
about the slide before. I had a question. What is the sales package?
Oh, the sales package. Good question. Sales package are often on the, when horses are sold, and especially jumpers from trainer barn to training barn, a lot of times they will sell one horse, but they do a deal that says, I'll sell this one at this price. If you give me 20 for that one, I'll throw him in. Well, that trainer thinks, I don't really want that one, but I'm getting a better price on this one, and I can always sell that one for, you know, cheap. And so these horses get marked down, and oftentimes they have soundness problems. And again, just being in the horse sales business, I've been very aware of it through the years, that a horse that, say, has EDM or has EPM can get sold because they don't know what to do with it. And so they just put them in a sales package, sell 2 or 3 horses to a trainer or a buyer, and they get out of their barn and into someone else's barn. It's a lot more common in the sport horse world than you know. Does that answer your question for the person?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So again, thinking from foal to retirement and all the careers in between, you know, many of the top sport horses, they're sold 4 to 10 times during the career, but one of the horse's skill sets is making new friends. So as long as they are well-adjusted horses and they know they're a horse and they know how to make social friends with people and horses, they can do very well. It's the horses that never learned how to be a horse that struggle. So what's the responsibility for humans? Well, the responsibility is at every stage of a horse's life. And this is something that we don't always think of. You know, we think, oh, I'm buying a 4-year-old, or I'm buying a meter 30 horse, or I'm looking for a second level dressage horse, or I'm looking for a reining horse for an amateur. But we really need to think about that whole horse's history. Where has it been? What has it done? Where is it going? Where is it going after us? So whether you're a breeder, buyer, trainer, broker, sales agent, breed associations, organization, farrier, vet, groom, body worker, owner, investor, horse show officials, sponsors, tack makers, and others, anyone who says they love horses has to be involved with questioning, is that horse look happy? Where did it come from? Where is it going? Because we can influence it. Even shippers can influence a horse's life. And, you know, we don't think how much it can happen, but, you know, a farrier that just doesn't tell you the horse slipped in the cross ties and pulled its nuchal ligament, now that horse has a headache and it's out and you're trying to jump it, it's starting to rear or it gets ulcers. Those little things can they can get missed because someone says, oh, it's not my job, that's somebody else's job. Well, it is your job. Anybody who has anything to do with a horse needs to be communicating to the other people that have something to do with that horse about that horse's welfare, physical and mental. If a farrier, you know, we're working a little bit with the farrier groups about talking about, you know, can we give a form so that a farrier shoes a horse, those that want to participate, what they can do is they can fill out a form and say, you know, the horse stood evenly on all 4 legs, had no problem. Or they can say, the horse had trouble standing on the left hind. And while you hope your farrier is going to tell your trainer or your owner or tell you that, many of these farriers are shoeing horses in a barn and there's nobody even there in the barn to tell. So they have no idea, you know, they don't tell people, and they're certainly not going to tell them if they get injured. They might not be back, you know, back again. So who's responsible to oversee horse welfare? Individual organizations and associations for each discipline. It's another kind of question to people out there. I'm curious if they have an idea. Humane and welfare organizations, governing sport horse organizations, governments, federal and state. We do have a horse protection law, but it only applies to walking horses and wild horses here. Canada has one, the UK has one. Different countries, different states all have different regulations. Individual horse owners, event organizers, sponsors, others. Who do you think is most important? Who is responsible for the horse oversee welfare?
And anybody who chooses to give a thought or response, please put it in the chat.
And can be all of the above too. That will take some work. So what can we do now? We can do a lot right now, and I'm going to focus on that because that's the positive that we can do. While it looks like an immense issue with everybody having, scrambling around trying to get welfare guidelines, there's actually quite a bit we can do. And that's where Horses and Human Research Foundation comes in, because the research of collecting all the data and evaluating the models and seeing how they best apply and how people can use them, that's not ever been done. And now we're starting to see acceptance of those models and the work that Horses and Humans Research.
Yeah, somebody answered your last slide.
Oh.
They said currently individuals.
Okay, it makes everybody that has a horse responsible for their own horse. Well, I'm going to give a little extra, and this was done by surveying the industry, surveying breeders, trainers, veterinarians. When I wrote the book, I was first going to, I was asked to redo one of my books I wrote in German on stress management, but it really wasn't it wasn't appropriate for where we were in the world today with horses. So I took it to the industry and said, well, what would you read? What would be helpful? And everyone said a tip book would be helpful, just with tips and backed up with science. So I thought it would be a little tip book with a little science. It turned out to be a much, much larger book. It's still kind of an introduction, but it has a lot more in it than what I had anticipated. And thank goodness Trafalgar felt the same way, that it has a lot of information. But there are some things we can do right now. Breeders can test horses for genetic defects. I have had a number of horses starting out as behavior cases, but really we're using behavior to diagnose conditions that are like EDM, which is a genetic predisposition, particularly in the warm bloods. And we're finding that it's particularly in certain lines of warm bloods. And they're not yet testing for it, but we are developing, when I say we, the industry is developing a database. And the more people that get their horses genetically tested that have these conditions, the easier it's going to be to identify it and possibly fix it before it becomes debilitating for the horse. There's nothing worse than having an upper level 8 to 12-year-old jumper or dressage horse start to have problems, spend a year, spend $30,000 and find out it has EDM, have a necropsy, and realize it was a genetic disorder. So testing for genetic defects, they do it in the paint horses, the quarter horses, because they've identified certain things. So we don't do it in sport horses yet, but we need to push for that. We need to only be breeding quality horses so that we don't breed horses with poor physical or mental inheritable conditions. Thinking because your horse has a condition that's physically limiting for it, or it's mental and it isn't easy to train, and now you're going to breed that mare. Think about what you're passing on and think about if that's a wise decision or not, because you may or may not be passing on conditions that are going to create issues for that horse. Microchip horses, the FEI and the USCF now require it. Most of the vets, and you don't have to have a breed to microchip. They're microchipped in Europe. What we need is a database that will track it geographically so people can find their horses, and we don't quite have that yet. But microchipping at least is one way to help protect the horse and track it if you can. Only breed horses the market will support. And some people suggested limiting the number of registered horses each year so that we're not overproducing horses for the market. And that will help keep horses prices high, but also protect horses. They'll be valued more than if someone has too many horses and they don't know what to do with Other thing breeders can do is identify the ideal person for your horse if you're selling. Don't just sell to anywhere, you know, and that's the problem with selling through sales is you don't know who's going to buy your horse. And that's, you know, whether it's race horses and now sport horses, you can't say, I only want this horse to go this place. But I suspect that there are groups that are working at better matching up, saying, you know, I worked with a group that is no longer developing, but the app was in progress that would match breeders to buyers. So you could say what you're looking for, because most breeders of sport horses, they do want to know where their horses go. And many of them said that if they could find that horse when it was old, they would take it back. So there's an opportunity there for those app developers to track those horses and say, hey, we have a 21-year-old with a service career and you were the breeder. Would you like that one back for retirement? So also send all the health and training records with your horse. And that's a stickler because vets won't send them if the owner won't release them. An owner that doesn't release the health records of the horse is a suspected owner. And a trainer that won't release the training records is a suspected trainer. And while, you know, I'd recommend people not buy the horse without it, and oftentimes you don't get it anyway because you pick a horse up at an auction or you don't know where the horse came from. But truly, that is an ethical thing to do for the horse's welfare. Well, regardless of what that horse has had, you need to have the health records, not the vaccine, just the vaccination records. But if the horse has had an injury or been evaluated for anything, so that the behavior, both the mental and physical, go with that horse, like a how-to book. And good people that send a whole book with a horse. And again, many trainers want you to know everything about that horse. And those are the ones that we should be cultivating and supporting. Know where and to whom your horse goes to if it's sold. I already mentioned that the idea of not knowing where your horse goes because you can't stand it, that's just bad. Everyone that sells a horse should try to stay in touch with where that horse goes so you can track its welfare. You have an option to buy or take back a horse for retirement, or if something goes wrong with that horse, you know, and that's where the good trainers will do that. If the horse doesn't work out, take it back. They may not sell it for the same amount and give you all the money back, but they care about that horse and they want to make sure it is with the right person. You can also, as breeders get involved in breed associations and horse organizations and start setting up a retirement fund. So it's like a life insurance policy on breeds, like the thoroughbreds have done, where now they're contributing to retirement homes and rehoming and retraining. We could be doing the same thing for various breeds of sport horses. So here's a question for everybody. Okay, and again, you don't have to answer it, but think about it. Have you ever sold a horse and been able to track him or her until he or she died?
Anybody who would like to put an answer, please put it in the chat.
We have a quiet group. All right, so if you're a buyer, buyers.
But he said most of them, a few I've lost track of.
Okay.
And somebody else said never owned a horse.
Okay. Most people, when I've asked that question, they have lost track of the horse. And that's the norm. It is very hard to keep track of a horse that gets sold, you know, more than once. And they're hard to disappear. So it's a sad thing for the horse because horses make friends as they go. And horses sometimes wonder where their people went after they spent quality time with their people.
Yeah. Somebody else said horse rescue, 0, we track them all. Another person said, yes, sold a horse, but the new owner ghosted me. And then somebody else said, never sold a horse. And somebody said, had a horse that required 3 people, okay, before it could be moved.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. Those are good comments. So buying and dealing, you want to deal with reputable people who will share the history of the horse as well as the breakdown of finances. And what I found in selling horses through the years is that people that are dishonest about finances also tend to have ethical issues about the history and telling you what's up with the horse. The people that are good about finances say, look, this is what's happening. Here's how many commissions. Here's what the horse is going to cost. You know, this is just reality, folks. And they have no problem disclosing everything. So encouraging ethical behavior, having and requiring bill of sales and the history of the horse and requiring, the history of that horse's health as much as possible is key to helping people basically be ethical. Require all the vet records be transferred with the horse. I sold horses, sport horses, for almost 20 years, and some of my friends that wouldn't sign a seller's sale agreement or a buyer's agreement that they would do this, I would not sell their horses. And they would say, well, my word is good for it. And I said, if you're a friend and your word is good for it, then put your name on that piece of paper. Because it's very expensive to sue someone, and people don't sue. But it is the psychology of saying you will be honest and ethical to the best of your ability. And, recognizing when you buy or agent a horse, the responsibility of care that you may keep that horse forever. It's like adopting a kid. You might think you're going to sell it one day, but you have to be prepared to keep it, no matter what the cost is. So trainers, what can you do? You can assess a horse before purchase or when a horse is brought into you for training. A lot of trainers, people will come to them with horses. Others, trainers sell and trade horses all the time. I've had and talked to many trainers where I've come out to look at the horses and they said, gosh, I trusted this trainer. They sent me a horse. They told me it was this, and this one has turned out to be completely different. Well, it is buyer beware, but at the same time, you're busy. You just have to develop an ethical practice. You have to be willing to address welfare issues as a trainer and at-risk horses and be willing to put the time in to correct it. And those are the good trainers we should be rewarding. And I've been fortunate to know several of them this season that, they're losing money on these horses that they could have sold, but they kept them because they knew that they were not happy horses, and they put a lot of money and time into getting those horses to be top rate and feel good. And they're taking pride in the fact that their horses are not only winning, but they're winning because they're happy. You want to communicate welfare concerns to the seller or client. If you think a horse is a little skitsy, or you think the horse might colic, or you think the horse gets ulcers easily, those are the kinds of things that should, be communicated. If you as a trainer see another trainer with a horse that you think might be at risk mentally or physically, the tendency has been look the other way because no one wants to be blackballed. But if we don't start speaking up and we don't start asking questions and we don't start putting some pressure on those trainers, they're the ones that tend to bully the industry. So you have to communicate. You can communicate in a nice, fun way, like saying, how many nose bends do you think that horse needs? Do you think it can breathe? And, I have found even saying things out loud in a nice way draws attention and things change. They're almost embarrassed when they can't answer something. I've had some odd answers too. But you need to always be thinking you're committed to the horse's best interest. And what does that mean? I've had trainers tell me like, oh, it just broke my heart to walk into that barn and see those horses. That one was starving. Another one didn't have water. And I said, what'd you do about it? Oh, well, it wasn't my place to do anything. Because who do you report it to? That is an issue, and that's something that has to change. Because a lot of times the animal control won't do anything. The FEI or the USAF won't do anything. There's no organization to report to. So, but you can still document it. Even if there's no one, and you can still say something. You can ask a question. So as a trainer, you can minimize tack and ensure that your tack fits your horse comfortably. Certainly see a lot of bad fitting tack, and had trainers tell me, well, this is the way the horse came. They told me he likes this bit and they likes this. And I said, did you ever try something different? Maybe the horse doesn't like it. And of course, we find something that the horse liked much better, not as restrictive. As trainers, we want to continue to learn about horse behavior and welfare and take courses, continuing ed. Trainers need to display good examples at shows and events to clients and to the public. You need to speak out again if you see a welfare issue, and you need to get involved in the horse organizations to implement education and welfare guidelines. We need the industry itself taking responsibility to move us forward. Veterinarians. I think veterinarians, they're on the sidelines, and yet at the same time, they're the primary voice for the most sport horses. And over again, I would say to one of the FEI vets or USAF vets, that horse is totally stressed, it's going to have a heart attack. And he'd look at me and go, I can't say anything. There's no rules or regulations. I don't want to get sued. There's no blood. The noseband's loose enough. And I'm like, but look at the respiration on the horse. Look at the nostrils flared. Like, and he said, well, I'm glad I'm not riding that horse. that's not okay. We need to support the veterinarians to be the voice, and they need to be working at all times on behalf of the horse, not the client. And that's a tough one because the vets may get paid by the client. They don't get paid by the horse. So there is no incentive for that vet to tell you that there's something wrong with that horse or to fail a pre-purchase exam because that client might not hire them anymore or pay them anymore. So this is an area we need to work with. We really need to be educating and empowering vets to make welfare decisions on not just the physical, but also the mental health of horses. And currently I am working with some vets on helping to develop the mental health check for a pre-purchase exam that can reflect both. It won't be detailed. It's just simply a little checklist of looking at some of the welfare issues of being able to help identify a stressed horse. And they can then make comments. I've had vets tell me it's not their right or their role to report on training. Well, yes, it is if you think it affects the horse. In some states, I believe there's 7, I may be wrong on that. There's several states that if you do not report a welfare issue, you can lose your license as a veterinarian. But other states, there's nothing. If you report a welfare, issue, who are you going to report to? You just don't have any business. So we have to figure out a way to deal with that and really empower them. And veterinary organizations need to start to require vets to report welfare issues, if not to outside to themselves, so that the AAP can at least keep track of who those bad actors are. Veterinarians should be required to transfer health records with the sale of any horse. Right now, they're not, and it's up to the owner. And so, that's something that vets can discuss, states can discuss, and they can say, if the AAP says you must, this is for the the health of the horse, at least anything that could be critical to the horse's welfare. You can have screens on that. It doesn't have to be every little detail, but it certainly should be the records that are important to that horse's welfare. The vet should have the support of horse show organizations to identify and report welfare issues at horse shows and at barns of known competitors in conjunctions with officials. That comes from the industry. That's something that both veterinarians and officials mention, that they need more support of the organizations, because when they have said that they think there's a welfare issue, that they have not been listened to. And so we as spectators, as participants, need to really support that and recommend that to the organizations. This is another one that was recommended, and I thought this was very clever, that vets should be required to disclose drug use and shipments to specific farms. Maintenance injections should be monitored. Many trainers that did not like the amount of drugs going to certain farms that were never, quote, tested, said, and a vet told me the simplest way is just release the records of where injections and drugs are being sent by the drug companies, and you'll find out who's using them. So that is one way to look at protecting the horse. But that today, currently, they don't have to release that information.
And we've got 10 minutes left.
Oh my gosh, I got to go through fast.
Time flies. It's terrible.
All right. Grooms and other health professionals, again, requiring communication and education. You work together. TAC and horse suppliers and manufacturers really work to create more horse-friendly products instead of some of the things that are definitely abusive. Sponsors, this we can really work on. Research, I tell sponsors, research the rider and event organization for welfare violation and the public's perception. Put your money where your values are. Require that the riders and events ensure the highest level of horse welfare through alliances with reputable organizations. You can sponsor horse rescue and horse organizations that work on education to further the alliance of good welfare science, because social license can ruin a brand. And the more that a brand educates the public about why you support horse sports, you're going to be supporting the good people. Sponsors kind of hold the money card. Farrier, shippers, body workers, basically all horse professionals, they need to communicate, ask questions, report welfare issues. Don't assume it is none of your business. Let the owner, trainer, and others know, and again, work with other in the industry. Horse show and event organizers, we know this. Some of this is being implemented with USEF and also with FEI. These have been suggested to both organizations to give incentives, reward good trainers, lighten noise restrictions, comfortable stabling. Stalls have to be large enough, oversight in warm-up areas and barns, designing classes and schedules so that horses are not overused. Other suggestions were, and you talk about a soft eye, this was a mare who couldn't even show, took 4 years, and within a few weeks of getting her feeling safe, her first show, she had a 72% in dressage. So it was just getting her feeling safe. So some of the other things they talked about that not necessarily can be implemented, but having turnout with grass so horses can roll, or without grass, biosecure grazing areas if that's a concern, lunging, limit time and oversight, require competencies tests of competitors before they're allowed to move into higher levels, and again, schedule classes with horses in mind. Organizations and associations, that's everybody, breed, discipline, sport, veterinary, farriers, grooms, they all can be working together. And we haven't seen that yet, but if we get some ethics and can do some conferences, I think we can bring together this whole industry. There's groups like the World Horse Welfare that's working on it. So we do have some limitations. Another most indicated, the horse organizations today indicated that that's not their mission and vision. They assume people competing take good care of their horses, but we do need to educate across disciplines and professionals. There's quite a fear of science and hesitancy to work with other groups. So we're really at a crossroads right now to maintain horse sports. While it's about numbers and money, we have to start looking at how do we bring the industry together. Public perception, they don't see different disciplines, breeds, or horse professionals. So I did this little video that I'll see if it even works.
You can tell a lot about how happy horses are when you walk into a barn. This barn lets horses interact and be much more social, and we've already got one stretching out to say hi. And horses will ask for our attention in different ways. They say different things. So over here, that was the next stretcher. Over here, we have the banger that says, come over to me and say hi to me next. This shows very functional horses that want to meet people. They're not interested so much in food, but what we smell like. Who are you? And each horse might communicate that a little different. This one just simply gives a soft eye with the ears forward, a little head drop, and says, can I meet you? Very nice. And then this one over here is a little bit more interested, and is the one that was doing the little stretch with the head. And so you notice the ears kind of go back, and there goes the head. So a little different way to stretch and say hi.
So that one little flip that I did at a client's barn, I walked in to look at a horse and I thought, oh, they're all standing out, they're playing, they had a good time. That got almost 2 million views. It went viral. It had 115,000 likes, 400, well, it's about 600 comments now, and it's had almost 10,000 shares in less than 3 weeks. What that tells us is that the public's interested in how horses talk, and that was the name of the little short reel. So public perception, a lot of people made, not a lot, but a few people made comments about horses should be wild and not ridden. And what was interesting is that different people in the comment section were responding to other people, which meant that they were engaged in reading these comments and giving different opinions. So the public is going to direct. Public pressure is forcing organizations to develop welfare guidelines. You see, and we've talked about FEI, we've got code of conducts, we've got that. Policy statements, codes of conducts are strong, but we still don't have a lot of agreement across the disciplines. Everybody's got something, but no one's quite working together. So the future and welfare of horses with humans is not a question of need, money, or space, but rather a question of the human heart. Are we going to make the sacrifices to protect horses? Are we going to be able to cultivate ethical people and educate across disciplines, professions, and the public? We need to collaborate. Horse interest groups like the thoroughbred model, the rescues, the rehoming. We need to have new careers for retired sport horses and a centralized database for tracking horses. We need to be working with veterinary organizations to continue care standards, including mental health. And we need to educate and develop humane end-of-life options. So it starts with this whole system approach based on science to gain both public and equestrian support for horse welfare. Integrating science and welfare. There hasn't been a lot of funding for it, but we can certainly start getting the public interested in sponsors. We've got equitation science, animal welfare science, human psychology. We have a whole lot. This was just a chat response to look at why people resist science. Nothing new. They're afraid of it. They don't think it fits. So we need to gather the knowledge. We need welfare science has evolved, from different sectors, from human psychology, assessment models. We have a whole lot of different groups that are participating in it. So resisting change is one thing, resisting knowledge when it can benefit the horse is denial. And science is producing the information and tools that should be embraced by the horse industry to help improve the life of our horses. So we need to think about communicate, collaborate, educate, and then regulate. And part of that model needs to dissolve fear in science. We need to start with simple principles like the 5 domains, the 5 freedoms, the 3 Fs. We need to elevate and bring together the good horsemen that support this. We need to engage the public to learn about horse welfare. We need to limit the number of events at specific levels horses can compete in, and the number of times perhaps maybe horses can be sold and still compete. We need to educate and encourage sponsors to back good welfare science. We need competitions to be more horse friendly. We need to set up retirement funds. These are all comments from the industry that came in that I acquired and put together in the book. We need to require competency tests on horse behavior and welfare for officials and require continued education. We can fund retirement rehoming centers from breed registries, and events can contribute to the funding. Sponsors can too. We can develop a good database for welfare science and a collaborative plan to reach into these various sports and breeds and create competitions, opportunities in competitions. They're going to spotlight good training and happy horses and maybe expand our horse shows so that they're more fun for the horse. As trainers have often said, if it isn't fun for the horse, why are we doing this? So we need a lot more collaboration among governments and horse show organizations, stakeholders, and the public. So science is coming together. These are just some of the sciences that all have welfare models from psychology, human horse, child, family, trauma assessment. They've all been applied: equine science, social science, animal welfare, veterinary science, cognitive science, interspecies communication. They all need to be synthesized together so that we can look at maybe not just one model like the 5 freedoms or the 3 Fs, the friends, freedoms, and food, the 5 domains. There's a lot going on about that. So we also have assessing affective states, and that's more the cognitive. So there's a whole lot. Just wrap it up. The simple checklist is probably one of the easiest. I talk about a lot about that in the book, working with clinicians on how to do a simple social check for mental health. But everyone can be instrumental in change. But first, they have to be aware of the issues. So we want to ask questions, document, report, get educated, get involved, be a horse's voice. And as Darwin said, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but rather the most responsive to change. And this is Brendan Wise showing with just a rope. So the love of all creatures is the most notable attribute of man.
Wow. It was so much. Thank you so much, Mary Ann. There was so much great content there, and there's so much more that we would love to learn and to talk about. Out of respect for everyone's time, I'm afraid we have to wind it up, but I'm hoping maybe we can have a part 2. Have to come back and continue on. So Pebbles, do you have any closing comments?
I just didn't know if there were any questions or anybody had a question or two that they would like to ask before we close up. Burning questions.
Comments, thoughts?
Somebody said thank you for all the great information.
Request for part 2?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Talk so fast, but you do have I don't know if this is going to be on the on your website or your YouTube, but people could go through it a little slower if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, thanks.
It will be evergreen. So
yes,
it will live
be
forever, and people can watch it as many times as they want and as quickly or as slowly. So this is great.
Well, and I'd be happy to come back because I do think this needs discussion. This isn't a one-shot thing. So
wonderful. Wonderful. We love it.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you, Mary Ann, for all this great information, and we will see everybody on another webinar Wednesday.
Thank you so much.